Hey guys, tonight, we slip off our sneakers, close the laptop tabs, and wander into a place far away from Wi-Fi signals or traffic jams. You're stepping straight into feudal Japan, not as a tourist with a camera, but as someone with a sword hanging at your hip and a family name to defend. The air smells faintly of pine and smoke, and the roads are just dirt tracks lined with wooden houses and paper lanterns. You probably won't survive this journey. Let's be honest, feudal Japan isn't exactly cozy Airbnb country, but it'll be worth it. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where in the world you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are born into the samurai class, and that fact alone seals your destiny. No choice, no opt-out form. Your family is part of the warrior aristocracy, and that means from the moment you can walk without tripping over your own toes, people already expect you to carry yourself with discipline. Forget playing tag in the mud. Your games involve tiny wooden swords and practice bows overseen by tutors who scowl if you slouch. You live in a compound walled in by wooden palisades, with a small shrine to your ancestors tucked into one corner. Every morning, incense drifts up from it, and your parents bow, reminding you that your bloodline is tied to honor. This world is rigid. Society has layers, almost like a lacquered box, stacked neatly. Emperor at the top, shogun, daimyo, samurai, peasants, craftsmen, merchants, and finally, the folks. Nobody wanted to mention out loud, like entertainers or butchers. You're locked in place by birth. Historians still argue whether samurai were truly noble guardians of virtue, or simply an armed elite holding peasants in check. Either way, you're stuck in the armor-polishing business for life. Your childhood is no joke. By the time you're 5, you're taught to sit properly in Caesar back, straight knees folded beneath you, because a crooked back is a crooked spirit. You practice calligraphy until your brush slips through tired fingers, because a samurai's soul is expressed in ink as much as in steel. It's said that a poorly written character reveals a poorly trained warrior. Meanwhile, physical training starts early too. Picture yourself at 7 years old, a wooden bokken clutched in your hands, clashing against an older cousin who seems way too enthusiastic about whacking you. Bruises normal, complaints not allowed. And yes, you're expected to excel in archery. Mounted archery competitions are one of the highest displays of skill, and you're drilled constantly to control a bow almost as tall as you are. To make it harder, you're doing it while balancing on a horse that does not care about your destiny. Every time the animal snorts and stumbles, you grip the reins tighter and mutter a nervous prayer to Hachiman, the god of war. Daily life feels strict, but it isn't without warmth. Your mother may be wrapped in a silk kimono, hair pinned with care, gently correcting your posture or helping you memorize a Confucian verse. Your father. He's stern, maybe terrifying, but every once in a while he'll ruffle your hair when you master a kata without mistakes. That's as close as you get to a gold star sticker in this world. The food, by the way, isn't bad. Rice is central, of course, but you also eat miso soup, pickled vegetables, and occasionally fish or chicken if the household is wealthy enough. Forget pizza night, you get grilled eel instead. And tea. Endless bowls of tea, each sip a reminder that even refreshment is tied to discipline. Later in life, tea will be ceremonial, a performance of balance and respect, but for now, it's just hot leaf water that burns your tongue if you drink too fast. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some samurai families believed in deliberately exposing children to hardship, even small acts of cruelty, so they wouldn't grow up soft. A boy might be woken in the night to sit outside in the cold, or made to eat plain millet, while the rest of the household feasted just to toughen him up. You're sitting in the dark courtyard, shivering under the stars, muttering that you didn't sign up for this, except you did by being born. Still, it's not all drills and gritted teeth. On festival days, the town around you explodes with color. Lanterns glow, drums pound, and you catch glimpses of kabuki actors painted in wild makeup. Merchants hawk sweets, Children chase each other in wooden getter sandals, and even hardened warriors sneak a smile. Of course, you're reminded by elders not to mingle too much. A samurai must not become distracted, but you sneak tastes of candied chestnuts anyway. As you grow, you notice something else. Your life is being shaped, not just by swords and shrines, but by an invisible web of loyalty. Your family swears fealty to a daimyo, a local lord, who in turn bends the knee to the shogun. Every lesson, every lecture, reminds you that your purpose isn't about personal ambition. It's about serving. The sword you polish isn't really yours. It's a piece of your master's will. You are a living extension of someone else's authority. And somewhere in the background always is the unspoken reality. If you fail, if you dishonor yourself, you may be expected to commit seppuku ritual suicide. It's a concept introduced to you even as a child, whispered like a bedtime story with far too much edge. You don't fully grasp it yet, but the idea that your own life is not entirely your own lingers in the corners of your mind. Historians still argue whether samurai genuinely embraced this with serenity, or if it was just crushing social pressure disguised as virtue. Either way, you're learning to bow deeply and keep your mouth shut about doubts. By the time you're entering your teens, the identity of samurai has seeped into every part of you. Your body is hardening under constant training, your calligraphy scrolls are pinned up with pride, and your sense of self is built on two pillars: honor and duty. You may joke with other boys during sparring, trading exaggerated death groans when hit, but you know deep down that the laughter won't last. The path is set. The world outside your compound is wide and restless. Wars, alliances, betrayals. But inside your narrow training yard, everything feels contained in ritual and repetition. A bow before every practice, a bow before every meal, a bow before bed. Bowing, bowing, bowing. If modern kids sometimes dream of escaping chores, you dream of escaping a world where even sneezing requires an apology to your ancestors. Still, there's a strange comfort in this rigidity. The path is demanding, but clear. You don't lie awake at night wondering what you'll be when you grow up. You already know you'll be a samurai. The years pass, and childhood bruises give way to the heavy responsibilities of adolescence. You are no longer the small boy with wobbly balance and ink-stained sleeves. You are now training as a full-fledged warrior in waiting. Dawn still arrives early, and so does your regimen. The rooster crows, the courtyard fills with the scent of damp earth, and you are expected to be up-armored in determination, if not in steel. Your mornings begin with sword practice. The katana gleaming in its lacquered scabbard is not yet your personal possession, but rather a family heirloom passed down for training. Every motion is deliberate unsheathing in a single breath, cutting downward as if slicing through the invisible weight of dishonor itself. Your teacher hovers like a hawk. One misstep, one lazy wrist flick, and you get a sharp crack across the knuckles with a bamboo rod. If you complain, you get 2 cracks. You quickly learn that silence is the better strategy. Training is not just about strength, it's about precision. Your sword must feel like an extension of your body. Swing too wildly, and you dishonor the steel. The samurai ethos insists that even killing should be elegant, clean, and purposeful. And yes, you're still doing calligraphy on the side, because apparently stabbing an opponent messily and writing a sloppy kanji character are equally shameful. A messy line is just another form of weakness. By mid-morning, you shift to archery practice. Japanese bows, the yumi, are famously asymmetrical, taller than a man, and awkward at first glance. Holding one makes you feel like you're wielding a fishing rod built by a sadist. Still, you must learn to draw the string smoothly and release without trembling. Mounted archery is introduced, and suddenly your life feels like trying to juggle while standing on a skateboard. The horse bolts, the target blurs, and your tutor calmly reminds you that missing is unacceptable. You mutter something unrepeatable under your breath, but then remember this is the life you were born into. Here's a mainstream historical fact in the Kamakura period, 1185–1333. Archery was considered even more important than the sword. Samurai were expected to rain arrows before closing in with blades. Your training reflects this hours spent not just drawing and releasing, but doing so in perfect posture, the kind that would make a yoga instructor proud. And yet for every elegant lesson, there's a quirky tidbit. Did you know that some schools of swordsmanship taught techniques based on animal movements? You might be told to imitate the still patience of a heron or the sudden strike of a tiger. In reality, your tiger strike looks more like a flailing cat, but the metaphor keeps the lessons memorable. As you sweat through drills, philosophy is hammered into you. The concept of Bushido, the way of the warrior, is not yet codified in neat textbooks. Instead, it seeps into your life through proverbs and lectures. A master might murmur, "Better to be a diamond with a flaw than a pebble without." You nod solemnly, though you're secretly wondering how a pebble could avoid flaws in the first place. Historians still argue whether Bushido in these centuries was a genuine lived ethic or an idealized set of rules written later to romanticize the past. But to you living in this time, it's real enough. Meals punctuate your training day. You slurp miso soup, chew pickled daikon, and refill your energy with rice. The simplicity of the food mirrors the simplicity of your expectations. No luxuries, no indulgences. Rice is the currency of survival, the proof of your family's relative status. When the stores are good, you eat well. When harvests are bad, you taste scarcity. Your tutors never let you forget that a samurai must accept both conditions with grace. Afternoons bring sparring sessions with peers. Here rivalry simmers beneath the polite bows. Everyone wants to prove themselves not just for pride, but for future positions in their daimyo's service. Wooden swords clash, grunts fill the air, and every bruise becomes a story. One boy gets cocky, laughs at your stance, and you promptly sweep him onto his back in the dust. The tutor scolds you both, but inside, you savor the moment. Evenings are quieter, but no less disciplined. You practice tea ceremony etiquette, because being a warrior isn't just about killing efficiently, it's about pouring hot water with elegance and setting down a tea bowl at the exact right angle. At first it feels absurd. You're dripping sweat from sword drills, and now you're expected to sit on your heels and whisk powdered tea with delicate flicks of the wrist. Yet over time, you realize it's all part of the same philosophy: control in all things. At night, the compound grows hushed. Crickets sing, the moon casts pale light over the tiled roofs, and you sit in the family shrine room with your parents. Incense burns, ancestors are honored, and you bow until your forehead almost touches the tatami mats. You're reminded again and again that you don't just belong to yourself. You belong to those who came before and those who will come after. Sometimes when you sneak away to sit alone under a pine tree, doubts creep in. Do you truly want this path, or are you just trapped in it? You shake the thought away quickly. If anyone heard you questioning the role of a samurai, it could stain your family's honor. And besides, where would you even go? It's not like you could switch careers and become a traveling merchant. That would be like trading a katana for a sack of potatoes, possible but laughable. Still, the flickers of rebellion make you human. You imagine just for a moment living without armor, without obligations, without the shadow of seppuku looming overhead. But then a bell chimes, calling you back to the compound. Duty waits, as it always does. Your daily life is a rhythm: train, eat, bow, repeat. Yet within this cycle, something is shaping you. Your muscles are hardening your reflexes, sharpening your handwriting, evening out your mind, steeping in a mixture of philosophy and practicality. Slowly, without noticing, you're becoming what you were always meant to be. The samurai is no longer just your father's role or your tutor's lecture, it's becoming you. The rhythm of your days changes as you move from being a youth in training to something closer to a young adult, ready to prove yourself. Life is still strict, but there's a difference. You're not just mimicking forms anymore, you're expected to embody them. A spar that once ended in laughter now carries consequences. A stumble in etiquette can be the talk of the household. And looming in the background like a mountain waiting for climbers Is the expectation of service your future role in your lord's domain? Your mornings continue to start early, though now you wake without being shaken by a tutor. You roll out of your futon stiff from yesterday's sparring, but determined not to complain. The first task of the day is polishing your equipment, the lacquered scabbard, the gleaming fittings of the sword, the armor plates stacked neatly in the corner. Armor isn't just protection, it's a display of wealth, skill, and reputation. Each rivet must gleam, each silk cord be tied properly, because a careless knot says you're careless in battle. Here's a mainstream fact. Edo period armor, though evolving over time, was often designed to balance beauty with function. Lacquer kept it resistant to rain, and intricate family crests decorated helmets to mark identity on the battlefield. That identity is more than aesthetics, it's your entire house's honor stitched and painted into the gear you wear. Then comes mounted training again. Horses are temperamental, and yours a brown mare with more personality than sense has already thrown you into the mud twice this week. As you guide her through the courtyard, you wonder if she secretly despises you. You notch an arrow, take aim at the straw target, and thunk it lands wide. The instructor sighs so heavily, it could flatten rice fields. And yet improvement comes. Little by little, your shots tighten, your control steadies. By midday, lessons shift from physical to intellectual. You're ushered into the study where scrolls are unfurled and ancient texts are read aloud. Confucian ideals, Buddhist teachings and family records blend into a single message: control yourself. Master your desires, live for duty. You trace your finger along the brushstrokes of an old proverb. The samurai's sword is his soul. You nod gravely, even though you secretly wonder if your soul feels more like a pile of aching muscles. And here's your quirky tidbit of the day. Some samurai practice poetry with the same seriousness as dueling. Haiku contests were as real as sword matches. Imagine sitting cross-legged, everyone glaring at you, waiting for you to produce a perfect 17-syllable verse about frogs or autumn leaves. If you failed, you lost face, almost as bad as failing in combat. You're not sure whether the pressure of a blade to your throat or a brush to your paper is worse. Afternoons are often spent outside the walls, walking through the nearby village. You're escorted, of course. Samurai aren't supposed to just wander aimlessly. But these trips are eye-opening. Farmers bow as you pass their backs, bent from labor, their hands rough from the soil. Children point and whisper. You realize in these moments that your position is more than just training. It's social weight. Your presence commands attention whether you want it or not. And yet humility is drilled into you. Your tutor warns you not to look down on commoners, for their rice supports your family. Without their labor, your armor would be decoration, your sword a useless stick. Historians still argue whether samurai were genuinely humble or simply expected to perform humility, but you feel the burden either way. Every bow, every nod, every controlled glance becomes part of your role. Evenings return you to the compound where advanced sparring takes place. Wooden swords are replaced by dulled steel blades, heavy and humming with potential danger. You face opponents with sharp eyes and sharper swings, learning to anticipate strikes, to parry in rhythm, to breathe without panic. The first time you feel steel graze your arm, even blunt, your heart leaps. That's when you realize this is no longer play. Afterward, the household gathers for the evening meal. Rice miso and grilled fish are laid out, steam curling in the lamplight. You kneel properly, wait for elders to eat first, and join in silence. Each meal is a lesson in patience and restraint. Your chopsticks held precisely, your back never slouched. If you thought dining was casual, you were wrong. It's a battlefield of etiquette. Night brings reflection. Lanterns glow softly, moths flutter against the paper screens, and you sit with ink and brush to write down the day's lessons. Journaling isn't optional, it's discipline. You record your hits and misses, your thoughts on duty, and perhaps if you're feeling bold, a small haiku about the stubborn mare who tossed you in the mud. No one reads these entries now, but perhaps your descendants will. Or perhaps they'll just laugh at your handwriting. Sometimes, as you write, you wonder about the larger world. You've heard whispers of foreign ships off distant coasts, traders bringing strange goods, priests with stranger ideas. You can't see them, but the possibility lingers like a storm on the horizon. For now, though, your world is here. Training grounds, shrines, scrolls, and the never-ending expectation that you will become the perfect samurai. And so as the crickets sing and the lamps flicker low, you bow once more to the family altar before bedding down. You are closer than ever to stepping into adulthood, but adulthood, you realize, isn't about freedom. It's about carrying the weight of everyone else's expectations without letting it crush you. The older you grow, the more the idea of service presses down on you, like the weight of a stone roof beam. You've been drilled in swordsmanship, you've absorbed philosophy, you've polished armor until your fingers cramped, but now comes the point where all of it has to be tested beyond the walls of your household. The prospect is thrilling, yes, but also terrifying. Because serving a lord isn't about your comfort or your preferences, it's about dissolving yourself into the will of someone else. Your day begins with ceremony. You kneel in the main hall, tatami mats cool against your knees, head lowered as your father's retainer explains the household's duty to your daimyo. You barely breathe, afraid of breaking the gravity of the moment. Here's a mainstream fact: the daimyo were powerful feudal lords who controlled large territories in Japan, and samurai, like you, owed them absolute loyalty. If a daimyo said march, you marched. If he said kneel, you knelt. If he said die well, you probably get the picture. The retainer lectures that your lord might summon you soon. It may be for something as simple as delivering a message, or something as serious as joining his armed escort. Either way, you're expected to obey without hesitation. To say no isn't an option. To even pause is dishonor. It's at this moment you realize that while you're still technically a youth, you're already treated like a cog in a much larger machine. Your training sharpens in response to this looming duty. Sword drills stretch late into the evening, and the forms are no longer corrected with patient humor. A misstep earns a barked reprimand, or a sharp strike from the instructor's wooden sword. You taste the sting of humiliation as much as you feel the sting of wood, and it lights a fire under you. After all, you don't want your first real service to be remembered as that time you embarrassed the family in front of the daimyo. On certain days, you're marched to the daimyo's castle itself. High stone walls loom over you, watchtowers bristling with archers' banners snapping in the wind. The scale alone is overwhelming. As you walk across the moat bridge, your sandals clapping against the planks, you can't help but think you're stepping into the mouth of some enormous beast, and inside precision. Guards stand rigid at attention, courtiers glide like shadows, servants bow so low they might snap their spines. The message is clear: the daimyo's household is order, and you'd better not be the one to disrupt it. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. Some samurai were assigned tasks so mundane they almost seem comical compared to the glamour of swordplay. Guard duty could mean literally standing for hours at a gate, bowing to every visitor until your knees gave out. Others carried messages on foot, dashing through rain and mud like glorified postal runners. One record even mentions samurai spending days just overseeing the measuring of rice sacks for tax collection. Imagine dedicating your life to honor and discipline only to be promoted to rice inspector of the month. And yet these tasks mattered. They proved you could be trusted. They built the foundation for larger responsibilities. That's the thing about service. No matter how menial, it's a chance to display your loyalty. Historians still argue whether most samurai truly embrace these chores as noble duty, or whether they grumble just as much as you probably would. But in your case, you don't dare grumble aloud, not when the eyes of elders are on you. The first time you carry a message to a neighboring village, your hands sweat so badly the ink smears slightly on the scroll. You bow deeply, deliver it, and return home without incident. Hardly epic, right? And yet when you kneel before your father to report the successful delivery, his nod feels like a medal pinned to your chest. You realize that service isn't measured in battles won, at least not at this stage. It's measured in whether you can be relied upon. Evenings back in your room, you practice reciting the formal phrases required when addressing higher-ranking samurai. Politeness is a blade sharper than steel, and one wrong word could make enemies faster than a misfired arrow. You mutter rehearsed greetings until your voice is hoarse, bowing to imaginary lords in the lamplight. Sometimes you wonder if you're training to be a warrior or a particularly disciplined actor. And then there are the nights when sleep comes hard. You lie on your futon, listening to the faint rustle of the compound, imagining what real combat might be like. You've heard tales whispered by veterans, the chaos of arrows darkening the sky, the scream of men charging, the smell of blood and sweat mixing in the dust. You clutch your practice sword as though it could protect you from nightmares. You remind yourself of Bushido, the code you've been told is your life's backbone. Loyalty, courage, honor, self-control. You repeat the words like a lullaby. In the quiet, a more sobering thought creeps in. What if you fail? What if, when called upon, you freeze or falter, or worse, the weight of expectation presses down, and yet you know you'll go when summoned? Because in this world, hesitation isn't an option. By dawn, you rise again, strap on your training gear, and bow toward the family shrine. Whatever doubts stir in your chest, you tuck them away. The life of a samurai isn't about being free of fear. It's about refusing to let fear show its face. Your chance to serve finally arrives, not with a dramatic trumpet call, but with a quiet summons at dawn. A messenger from the daimyo's household appears at the gate, bowing just enough to show respect, but not so low that he breaks formality. He presents a sealed order, and suddenly your entire body is electrified with anticipation. This is it, the moment you stop being only a trainee and start being a samurai in practice. The order is straightforward. Accompany your father's retainers on a patrol through the nearby countryside. Bandits have been rumored in the hills raiding farms and making off with sacks of rice. You imagine fierce duels under the moonlight blades, clashing glory earned with each swing. In truth, the patrol is far more tedious. Hours of walking muddy paths, nodding politely at nervous peasants and squinting into bushes where the only movement is the rustle of birds. Still, your hand never strays far from your sword hilt, and your senses buzz with heightened alertness. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Samurai weren't always on the battlefield. Much of their service was routine policing, tax collection, or acting as armed escorts for officials. Daily life was more often monotonous vigilance than constant warfare. That said, you can't shake the feeling that behind every rice paddy lurks the possibility of violence. On this first outing, your role is minor: carry spare supplies, fetch water, stand ready if needed. Yet you sense eyes upon you. The older retainers watch closely, gauging whether you'll stumble, complain, or lose focus. Every step becomes a silent test. You feel as though your sandals weigh double their usual weight, dragging through mud that sucks at your heels. And though nothing of consequence happens that day, when you return without mishap, it feels like a small victory. The daimyo himself doesn't acknowledge you, why would he? You're just one youth among many, but the household steward gives a curt nod as the patrol's report is delivered. That nod, brief as a breath, makes your heart swell. Recognition, however small, is oxygen for your ambition. You learn that serving a lord is less about individual glory and more about collective discipline. The samurai beside you aren't flamboyant warriors. They're quiet, restrained, and utterly focused on function. They don't strut like the heroes in songs. They move as though invisible, their presence measured and purposeful. The lesson lands hard. If you seek attention, you've missed the point. Of course, some duties verge on absurd. The following week, you're assigned to stand guard at a storehouse full of rice. Not a fortress gate, not a battlefield, just stacks of grain bundled in straw. You shift from one foot to the other for hours, staring at piles of food, as if they might leap up and run away. A fellow guard leans over and whispers, "We protect rice as if it were gold, because it is." And he's not wrong. In feudal Japan, rice was wealth measured as koku, the amount needed to feed a man for a year. Guarding it was essentially guarding the lord's treasury. Still, it doesn't stop you from yawning behind your sleeve. Here's a quirky tidbit. Samurai didn't always carry swords on duty inside castles. Sometimes they were required to hand them over at the gate as a sign of discipline. Imagine that the warrior defined by his sword, forced to leave it behind, like a kid leaving shoes at the door. You think about how naked you'd feel without your blade. Fortunately, your guard duty allows you to keep it strapped to your side, though unsheathing it would be considered a serious breach unless danger struck. Historians still argue whether the bulk of samurai service was glorified drudgery, or if the constant readiness gave life its sense of edge. After all, one quiet day of rice guarding could turn into sudden chaos if bandits struck. You remind yourself that boredom is often a disguise for lurking peril. At night, after long shifts of standing so still your legs ache, you return to your quarters and collapse onto your futon. Your dreams swirl with contrasting images, fields of rice transforming into battlefields, patrols ending in ambushes, faces of farmers shifting into those of enemies. You wake sweating heart, pounding unsure whether you crave excitement or dread it. During these early duties, you also begin learning the less glamorous side of loyalty paperwork. Yes, even in medieval Japan, records were everything. You find yourself watching scribes dip brushes into ink-tallying rice, listing weapons, noting patrol times. Sometimes, young samurai were expected to assist carrying documents or even practicing their own brush calligraphy. It dawns on you that literacy is as much a weapon as a blade. A miswritten character could mean a miscounted tax or a failed order. You train your brushstrokes with the same diligence as your sword swings, though admittedly with less flair. And then, just when you've begun to think your service is destined to be an endless parade of rice bags and ink stains, rumors reach the compound. The daimyo may march against a rival. The retainers murmur with excitement. Tension hangs heavy, and you suddenly understand that every dull patrol, every long hour of guard duty, every tedious scroll tally has been rehearsal. The possibility of war is like thunder in the distance. Not yet here, but enough to rattle your bones. You polish your armor until it gleams, sharpen your blade until it slices the air with a whisper, and steady your mind as best you can. Because whether you're ready or not, true service to your lord may soon call for blood rather than ink. Your first real taste of combat isn't the cinematic clash of armies you've imagined. It begins instead with an early morning alarm shouted through the corridors of the compound. You leap up, fumbling into your armor hands, trembling more from adrenaline than from clumsiness. The clatter of men preparing fills the air, metal plates snapping into place, swords sliding into scabbards, the low murmurs of men offering hurried prayers. When you step outside, the courtyard feels charged with invisible electricity. The daimyo's banners flutter in the rising sun, bold symbols painted on cloth reminding everyone who they fight for. You're not marching into a grand battle yet, only an ambush against bandits who've grown bold. Still, your stomach knots itself tighter than your obi. The march is brisk, the landscape deceptively serene, green hills, soft mist birdsong. You try to memorize every detail, thinking this might be the last beauty you see. The veteran beside you notices your tight grip on your sword hilt and chuckles. First fight, he asks, voice dry as gravel. When you nod, he grins. Don't worry, the first is always the hardest. After that, you only worry about the second, and the third. His voice trails off in deliberate mischief, and you can't help but laugh nervously. Here's your mainstream historical fact: samurai weren't always fighting other samurai. Much of the violence was against bandits, rebels, or peasants who resisted taxation. It wasn't always glorious duels on horseback. It was messy, confusing, and often against desperate people with little more than farm tools. When the skirmish begins, it's chaos. Bandits leap from the trees, ragged and desperate, wielding spears and rusted swords. Your companions rush forward, their movements precise, almost graceful in the frenzy. You meanwhile freeze for half a heartbeat, long enough for one of the bandits to charge straight at you. Instinct takes over. Your blade flashes upward, colliding with his in a shock that rattles your bones. He snarls, you shout louder, and somehow through raw panic more than skill, you push him back until another samurai cuts him down. Your breath comes ragged, your arms shake, but you're alive. And suddenly, absurdly, you realize you're grinning. Fear has been replaced by a wild, dizzying exhilaration. A quirky tidbit, some samurai carried small charms or talismans sewn into their armor, not unlike modern athletes' lucky socks. These could be scraps of sutra scrolls, written prayers, or even curious objects believed to deflect harm. You think back to the tiny cloth amulet your mother stitched for you before you left. It rests against your chest under the cuirass. You silently thank her, as if the charm itself had deflected the bandit's blade. Historians still argue whether samurai followed rigid codes of honor during these smaller fights, or if that's a later romanticized invention. Some accounts suggest samurai could be ruthless, taking no prisoners and showing little ceremony in battle, especially against dishonorable foes like bandits. As you watch the skirmish end, with the last of the raiders scattering into the woods, you wonder whether the clean ideals of honor you've been taught truly match the muddy, bloody reality. When the clash is over, silence returns almost rudely fast. Birds chirp again, as though nothing happened. The fallen are checked friends and foes alike. The dead are left in the field, only the injured are carried home. You look at your sword still trembling in your grip and realize the bright steel is marked with a thin streak of blood. You expected triumph, but instead there's a strange hollow inside you. Back at the compound, the veterans laugh and drink as if shaking off the day's danger. One slaps you on the back hard enough to nearly topple you. Well done, he says. You didn't die. That's step one. The room erupts in chuckles, and you can't help but laugh too, though inside you feel unsettled. You're praised quietly for your composure. Though you know the truth, you nearly froze. But maybe that's how every samurai begins, shaken, doubting, yet somehow still standing. You whisper to yourself that next time you'll be steadier. That night, lying awake, you realize the fight has changed you. The rice fields you once guarded seem more precious now, the patrol paths less dull. Every mundane duty suddenly makes sense. Everything you've done was preparation for this, and everything you'll do after is preparation for the next time steel sings. The moon shines through the paper screen painting your room in pale silver. You place your sword beside you, talisman tucked against your chest, and murmur to yourself, I live today. Sleep comes heavy, carrying you into dreams filled with banners, blood, and the soft whisper of blades. Morning smells different after your first real fight. The rice gruel tastes sharper, the tea more bitter, and the conversations around you hum with a rhythm you didn't notice before. Maybe it's not the world that changed, it's you. You sit in the compound's courtyard, polishing your blade with slow, deliberate strokes, replaying every heartbeat of the skirmish in your head. Word spreads quickly of the victory, though it was hardly a grand campaign. Still, for the peasants in the nearby villages, it means one less band of marauders to fear. A farmer bows so deeply before you on your next patrol that his forehead nearly touches the earth. You stammer out a polite acknowledgement, secretly shocked that anyone sees you as a hero. You barely held your own. Mainstream fact for you samurai weren't just warriors, they were also enforcers of their daimyo's will. Protecting villages, collecting taxes, and overseeing the order of society were as much their duty as charging into battle. That bowing farmer. His survival and livelihood depend on your lord's protection, which by extension now depends on you. The days that follow blend into a rhythm patrol train. Eat patrol again. The more time you spend with your companions, the more you see the quirks hidden under their stoic armor. One veteran hums folk songs under his breath while sharpening his spear. Another insists on telling wildly exaggerated battle stories, each more implausible than the last. A third meticulously oils his armor, but leaves his socks perpetually mismatched, swearing it's good luck. You begin to realize that beneath the reputation of fearless warriors, samurai are also just people. And sometimes, oddly, people with terrible laundry habits. One quirky tidbit: some samurai kept crickets in tiny cages as good luck charms or simply as companions. The steady chirping was said to soothe nerves and bring fortune. Imagine a hardened warrior armor, gleaming stoic face, unflinching, and tucked inside his sleeve, a small wicker cage with a chirping insect. The incongruity makes you smile. As the season shifts toward late summer, your daimyo summons the warriors to hear troubling news. Another domain has made aggressive moves along the border. Tensions rise, and the atmosphere in the compound thickens. Historians still argue whether feudal lords deliberately exaggerated border disputes to keep their samurai sharp and loyal, or if the conflicts were truly as constant as the records suggest. Either way, your lord prepares as if the danger is real. Drills grow harsher. Your sword arm aches your calves, burn from hours of stances, and your bowstring fingers blister. Yet when you collapse into bed at night, you feel stronger than ever before. You remember the bandit's eyes, the sheer terror, and how close you came to losing, and you train harder, determined not to feel that helpless again. Then comes your first taste of ritual ceremony beyond training and battle. One evening, you're summoned to the great hall where your daimyo sits in quiet authority. The floor smells faintly of cedar, the air heavy with incense. Servants pour sake into shallow cups, the liquid catching the firelight in amber glimmers. To your astonishment, a cup is handed to you. The daimyo raises his drink, speaking in measured tones about loyalty, courage, and service. His words aren't flowery, but the weight of them presses on your chest. You drink in silence, every nerve awake, aware that this isn't just refreshment, it's recognition. You've stepped from an outsider fumbling with a sword into a true member of the retinue. Later, back in the barracks, the veterans tease you mercilessly. Careful one says the daimyo drank with you. Next, he'll expect you to wrestle a bear in his name. The room bursts into laughter, and though you blush, there's warmth in their voices. You're no longer just the newcomer, they've accepted you. That night, lying beneath the crackling lantern light, you think of your mother again. You imagine telling her not only did you live through your first battle, but your lord himself toasted with you. She'd probably scold you for not standing straighter, but you know she'd be proud. The cicadas outside drone like distant drums, their chorus reminding you that time moves on relentlessly, whether you feel ready or not. You close your eyes, hand resting on the hilt of your sword, and whisper a quiet vow: you'll be ready for whatever comes next. Whether it's another skirmish, a border war, or something far greater, you won't just survive it, you'll meet it head-on, steel in hand. Autumn drapes itself over the land, crisp and golden, as if the whole world is exhaling after summer's fever. You find yourself walking patrols along the rice paddies, where the stalks bow heavy with grain. Farmers work in rhythmic silence, their wide-brimmed hats bobbing as they harvest. They bow as you pass, murmuring thanks. You're still not used to it. You want to tell them, "Don't thank me. I'm just trying not to embarrass myself with this sword." But you nod solemnly, pretending you're exactly the kind of unshakable protector they imagine. The air cools, the days shorten, and with the harvest comes tax season. And guess what? You're part of the team tasked with collecting it. This is where samurai life stops being glamorous. Forget jewels under cherry blossoms, you're now standing guard, while accountants tally sacks of rice. Rice is wealth currency survival. Without it, the daimyo cannot pay his men or feed his people. Without it, the farmers starve. Mainstream fact here: rice was the backbone of Japan's economy during the feudal era. Samurai were often paid not in coins, but in koku units of rice, measuring how much one person could eat in a year. So yes, when you're guarding sacks of rice, you're basically standing in front of a giant pile of samurai paychecks. No wonder everyone takes it seriously. Still, the job isn't without drama. One farmer pleads with the tax officials, arguing that floods ruined half his harvest. Another insists his field is cursed by fox spirits and offers less grain as a result. You can almost hear the veteran's eyes rolling. The debates stretch on for hours, voices rising until eventually compromises are struck, or swords are not so subtly rested on knees, as reminders of who holds the power here. And yet amid this, you notice something oddly endearing. One of your comrades who seems carved out of stone in battle crouches down to entertain a farmer's child while the adults argue. He pulls faces, pretends to drop his helmet with a comical clank, and has the child giggling uncontrollably. For a moment, the whole scene feels less like a standoff and more like neighbors bickering at a marketplace. A quirky tidbit: some samurai were known to compose short, witty poems, even during mundane duties like tax collection. A haiku about an uncooperative farmer or a senryu mocking the endless paperwork might circulate among the barracks, lightening the mood. Imagine your fellow warrior grumbling, "Collecting rice again. More sacks than my back can bear. Curse these endless fields." It's hard to stay too grim when someone slips you a sarcastic verse scratched onto the back of a tally sheet. The season also ushers in more formal ceremonies. You're invited to witness your first tea gathering, hosted by one of the higher-ranking samurai. Now, if you expected a simple sip-and-chat session, you're hilariously unprepared. Every gesture, every placement of a cup, every bow is part of an intricate choreography. You kneel for what feels like forever, your legs screaming as tea is whisked to frothy perfection and served in bowls so beautiful you're afraid to breathe near them. And yet the experience shifts something inside you. The silence, the deliberate pace, the way the host's movements feel like water flowing, it's oddly calming. You've heard whispers that the tea ceremony was more than just about drinking tea. It was about cultivating discipline, respect, and focus. Historians still argue whether its role was truly spiritual training for warriors or simply a pastime that became fashionable. But for you kneeling there with numb legs and a mouth full of bitter tea, it feels like another layer of samurai life unlocking before your eyes. The nights grow longer, the stars brighter. In the barracks, the veterans talk more freely, now swapping ghost stories and tales of legendary battles. One insists that a warrior's spirit lingers in his sword long after death. Another swears he saw a tengu, a long-nosed goblin, mocking him during a foggy night patrol. You laugh with them, though. When you step outside, the rustling leaves do make you glance twice into the shadows. But there's no denying that the rhythm of your life has changed. You are no longer the wide-eyed newcomer fumbling to hold a sword properly. You've fought, you've feasted, you've collected taxes, and now you've sipped tea like a courtier. Each layer of duty, whether glorious or mundane, is weaving you deeper into the fabric of this world. One evening, as the harvest moon rises full and orange, your daimyo himself walks among the barracks. He says little, only nodding, but the effect is electric. Every warrior straightens. Every joke dies in the throat. You catch his eye for the briefest moment. There's no smile, no words, but you feel the weight of being seen, recognized. And somehow that unspoken glance feels more rewarding than the sack toast weeks earlier. Later, as you lie on your mat, the smell of straw and autumn chill in the air, you realize you are becoming a samurai, not just in name, but in rhythm, in posture, in spirit. Your blade may still nick your thumb when you polish it, but your soul is hardening like steel in the forge. And tomorrow will only push you further. Winter creeps in slowly, like a cat stalking the edges of a fire. At first, it's only a nip in the morning air, then frost clinging to the rooftops, then finally a blanket of snow that hushes the entire world. You wake up one morning, slide the doors aside, and the training yard is gone, buried under white silence. It's beautiful, sure, but it also means your toes are freezing off before breakfast. The change in season shifts your duties. With the fields resting and farmers huddled inside your patrols, become longer, slower, and strangely quieter. You're trudging along paths dusted in snow, your breath puffing like dragon smoke, the world muffled under layers of white. Sometimes all you hear are your own footsteps and the occasional crow. It feels peaceful until your legs start going numb, and you realize your straw sandals are about as useful as paper socks. Mainstream fact winter posed serious challenges for samurai households. Maintaining weapons armor and supplies in the cold was crucial because battles didn't pause just because snow fell. Daimyo often timed campaigns around weather, but sudden winter skirmishes weren't unheard of. Snow could both hide movement and kill men through frostbite before a blade was even drawn. Your Lord Ever Cautious doubles down on preparedness. You're tasked with stacking firewood, mending winter coats, and checking food storage. You and your comrades joke that you've become glorified housekeepers with swords. Still, it's oddly satisfying to watch neat piles of rice bales and salted fish grow, knowing they might be the difference between comfort and starvation. And here's a quirky tidbit. Some households kept live koi or carp in special tubs through winter as a kind of emergency meat locker. Imagine explaining that to modern neighbors. Oh, this giant fish flopping in my shed. That's just my snow day snack reserve. You eye the shimmering tubs once and can't help but picture biting into cold sushi straight from storage. Your stomach says yes, your sense of dignity says no. Inside the barracks, the camaraderie deepens. Fires crackle, smoke curls, and men tell stories to pass the long nights. You're wedged between two grizzled veterans who argue heatedly about the best way to tie sandals in snow. One swears by twisting cords twice, the other insists once is enough. They glare at each other as if sandal tying is the hill they're willing to die on. Historians still argue whether samurai really obsessed over such minutiae, but judging from your barracks it seems plausible. Entertainment shifts too. Sparring outdoors becomes impractical when your hands are stiff icicles. Instead, you practice katas indoors, slow, deliberate movements that keep your blood warm. There's a quiet poetry to it, sword-slicing arcs through firelight bodies, moving like shadows on the wall. Sometimes, you even feel yourself slip into a kind of trance, where you stop worrying about your clumsy feet and start feeling the rhythm of it all. One particularly cold night, the Lord hosts a formal poetry gathering. Yes, poetry, because nothing says deadly warrior class like writing verses about snowflakes. Everyone is expected to contribute. You panic. The only lines in your head are about frozen toes and how much you hate rice gruel. But somehow, when your turn comes, words tumble out. Snow falls without sound. Armor waits in silent rows. Even steel grows cold. There's a brief silence afterward. Then polite nods. Someone even mutters, "Not bad for a beginner." You exhale, wondering if you just stumbled into your secret career as a medieval slam poet. And yet winter isn't all calm. Bandits grow bolder when farmers have food stores and travelers are fewer. One morning you're sent with a squad to investigate a missing caravan. The path winds through snowdrifts, your breath stings, and just as your patience thins, you stumble across tracks. The veterans move like wolves, silent and sharp, following the trail. Sure enough, you find the culprits, half-starved men trying to steal rice sacks. The fight is short, messy, more shoving than swordplay. The bandits scatter, leaving behind footprints vanishing into the snow. You help carry the salvaged rice home, your muscles burning, but you're oddly proud. You weren't just practicing moves in the yard anymore. You were part of something real. Later that night, as sake is passed around to thaw, the bones, the older warriors share their own winter tales. One swears he once saw a snow spirit, Yukiona, gliding through a blizzard, her white robe indistinguishable from the storm. Another insists he dueled a rival clan on a frozen river, every step threatening to crack the ice. You half suspect exaggeration, but the way their voices lower, almost reverent, makes you wonder. By the end of the season, you've learned winter is less about dramatic battles and more about endurance. It's about keeping the fire burning literally and figuratively. You're not the strongest swordsman, not yet, but you're learning to be steady, patient, dependable. As the snow begins to melt, the first brave shoots of green pierce the frost. You step outside, stretch your stiff limbs, and breathe in the promise of spring. And somewhere deep down, you realize surviving winter has been its own kind of victory. Spring bursts back into your world with almost comical enthusiasm. The snow vanishes, Streams swell and gurgle, and suddenly everything is green again, as if nature has been hoarding its energy all winter just to slap you in the face with it. Cherry blossoms explode like pink fireworks drifting lazily down onto the castle roofs and barracks. It's so picturesque you half expect a painter to show up and demand you hold still while he captures the moment. With the warmer air, life picks up speed. Farmers pour back into the fields, merchants swarm the roads, and your duties shift once more. Patrols lengthen as trade picks up, and you're back to guarding gates, inspecting carts, and chasing down the occasional fool who thinks he can sneak contraband under a pile of rice straw. One day, you even stop a merchant trying to smuggle in silkworm eggs without paying tax. The man stammers excuses while you try not to laugh, because honestly, the eggs look like little clumps of dust. Still, your lord takes taxation seriously, and you learn that in feudal Japan, failing to notice dust could get you in serious trouble. Mainstream Fact Spring was a critical season for daimyo, who relied heavily on agriculture and taxed the rice harvest to maintain armies. Samurai weren't just fighters, they often acted as enforcers of taxation and protectors of the food supply. In a way, your rice bowl and your sword are directly connected. There's another layer to Spring 2 ceremonies. Temples buzz with activity monks chanting under blossoming trees, while townsfolk donate coin for good harvests. You're sent to escort your lord during one such procession. Drums echo incense curls into the blue sky, and petals fall so thickly, you're brushing them off your armor every few steps. You can't help but notice how the lord's robes, rich crimson silk, embroidered with cranes, catch the sunlight. For a moment, you're less a warrior and more a moving ornament in a living painting. Here's a quirky tidbit. Cherry blossoms weren't just admired for their beauty, they symbolized the fleeting nature of life, much like the samurai ideal of impermanence. In fact, some samurai carried small lacquered boxes filled with pressed petals as keepsakes. You consider stuffing a few into your sleeve, but then remember you're terrible with allergies, and sneezing in the middle of patrol isn't exactly dignified. Training resumes in earnest, now that frostbite isn't a threat. You're back in the yard sweating under the sun, the smell of dust and blossoms mixing in the air. Your sword no longer feels like a clumsy stick in your hands. There's rhythm in your movements, the beginning of something resembling skill. The instructors still bark corrections, but occasionally, just occasionally, you catch a nod of approval. It's like spotting a shooting star, rare, fleeting, and oddly satisfying. And as spring livens the land, so too do festivals. One evening, you're given leave to attend a matsuri in the nearby village. Lanterns swing on ropes, vendors call out drums thunder, and dancers whirl in brightly colored yukata. You munch grilled fish skewers, burning your tongue but pretending you're fine because you're a serious warrior after all. Children chase each other with wooden swords, pretending to be samurai like you. For once, you're not just a hungry trainee, you're someone admired. But historians still argue whether samurai actually participated in these festivals as freely as commoners, or whether they remained aloof watching from the sidelines. Tonight, though, you decide to dive in. A villager drags you into a circle of dancers. You stumble, nearly trip over your own hakama, and definitely look ridiculous, but the laughter is kind, not mocking. For a few brief hours, life isn't about war or duty. It's about joy, about the warmth of firelight and the sweetness of roasted chestnuts. Of course, spring isn't all flowers and festivals. With thawing rivers and busier roads comes trouble. Bandits reappear emboldened after winter, and whispers of rival lords preparing for skirmishes reach your ears. Your lord orders drills, supply checks, and patrols near contested borders. The tension builds under the surface like a storm waiting to break. You sense it in the clipped tone of your superiors, in the way swords are sharpened more often, in the hushed strategy meetings behind closed doors. One dawn, you march out with a small patrol to scout a suspicious movement near the river. Mist curls off the water frogs, croak unseen, and your group moves like shadows. At one point, you think you hear footsteps in the reeds, but it turns out to be a crane lifting off in a burst of wings. The veterans smirk, and you pretend you weren't ready to swing at a bird. By the time you return, you're bone-tired, but oddly exhilarated. This is what it means to live as a samurai, balancing between celebration and vigilance, between cherry blossoms and steel. And so, as you stand in the courtyard, petals drifting around you, you realize spring is the season that best mirrors your own journey. You're not fully grown, not fully formed, but you're emerging, stretching, and readying yourself for the storms ahead. The world is warming, and so are you. Summer in Japan arrives like a slap with a steaming towel. The air grows heavy, sticky, and full of buzzing cicadas that scream from dawn to dusk, like tiny alarm clocks, with no snooze button. Your armor feels twice as heavy, your robes cling to your skin, and every breath tastes of heat. Still, life doesn't slow down just because you're melting. If anything, it speeds up. The rice fields ripple with green as farmers bend ankle-deep in muddy water, planting row after row under the punishing sun. You and your fellow samurai are tasked with keeping the irrigation canals clear, which sounds simple until you realize it means wading into foul-smelling ditches, hacking away weeds, and occasionally chasing off someone trying to borrow water for their own paddies. It's unglamorous work, but rice is wealth, and wealth means soldiers can eat. Without rice, swords are just shiny sticks. Mainstream fact, a samurai's stipend was measured in koku, the amount of rice needed to feed one person for a year. When the fields flourished, so did the armies. When drought struck, even samurai might face hunger. That's why summer wasn't just about sweating, it was about survival. Your lord organizes a midsummer ceremony at the local shrine, thanking the gods for rain and harvest. The procession winds through the village, with drummers, dancers, and priests waving branches of sacred sakaki. You march alongside armor polished, trying not to faint in the heat. You glance at the villagers tossing coins and clapping hands in prayer, and you realize religion isn't just ritual here. It's insurance. If the gods aren't pleased, the crops might wither, and then the samurai's lives wither too. Here's a quirky tidbit to beat the summer heat. Some samurai supposedly placed ice or snow in storage pits during winter, then dug it out for festivals months later. Imagine eating shaved ice while wearing lamella armor. You consider suggesting it, but your commander probably wouldn't appreciate your innovative focus on dessert. The nights, however, bring their own magic. Lanterns glow, fireflies drift like embers, and the distant boom of festival drums carries on the warm wind. You lie on your mat armor set aside, staring at the stars through the open shoji screens. Cicadas give way to the croaking of frogs and the soft trickle of water in the moat. You think of the rice growing steadily in the paddies of your lord, planning strategies by candlelight of villagers dancing barefoot in the fields to celebrate life's fragile abundance. But summer is also war season. Roads are clear, rivers are low, and armies can march. Whispers ripple through the barracks. Your lord is considering a campaign against a rival whose border raids have grown bolder. Historians still argue whether smaller daimyo truly launched summer skirmishes annually, or whether these campaigns were less common than later romantic tales suggest. But for you, the threat feels very real. One dawn, you're woken early armor strapped on and marched out for an exercise in formation. The sun hasn't even risen fully, but sweat already stings your eyes. You move with the line shield raised, then sword drawn, practicing maneuvers that look elegant in theory, but in reality leave you exhausted and panting. Still, the veteran's eyes glitter with approval. You're no longer stumbling. You're part of the rhythm. And then comes the watch duty, long nights on the walls where you swap mosquitoes, shift in your armor, and try not to yawn too loudly. Sometimes nothing happens, just the croak of frogs and the soft splash of fish in the moat. Other times, you hear footsteps or a dog barking far off, and your pulse quickens. False alarms usually, but the nerves never fade. The heat, the labor, the looming threat of battle, it wears you down, but it also sharpens you. By midsummer, your grip on your sword is steady, your footing firm. The boy who once tripped over his hakama is nearly gone. And then one evening, as you walk back from patrol, you see fireflies swirling above the rice paddies, their green light blinking in lazy arcs. For a moment, it feels as if the world itself has softened, showing you its gentler side. You breathe deeply, the humid air heavy in your lungs, and you realize something. This life is brutal, yes, but it's also beautiful in its own strange rhythm. Summer teaches you this balance: sweat and steel, festivals and fear, the buzz of cicadas and the silence before a battle. You fall asleep each night listening to the world hum, preparing yourself for whatever tomorrow brings. Autumn arrives slowly, almost shyly in your province. The cicadas fade, replaced by the rustle of dry leaves and the occasional cool breeze that feels like a blessing after months of sticky heat. The sky turns a softer blue, the morning's misty, and at last, your armor doesn't feel like it's trying to cook you alive. You step outside, inhale deeply, and nearly sigh in relief. This is the season samurai secretly love. The rice fields once green shift to a golden sea. Villagers swarm like ants harvesting with sickles, stacking sheaves into neat bundles. Your job, guarding the process. After all, rice isn't just food, it's wealth, wages, and power. A stolen cart of rice could mean an unpaid samurai, an empty granary, a weaker army. So you patrol the paddies, eyeing travelers suspiciously hand on sword. Mainstream historical fact taxes during this era were paid almost entirely in rice. That's right, no coins jingling in pouches, just sacks of grain. Daimyo counted their wealth not in gold, but in how many koku of rice their land produced. You could say the entire economy was grain-based. Pun intended. You're welcome. The harvest season also means festivals. Lanterns glow in the cool night air, the smell of roasted chestnuts drifts through the streets, and children chase each other with masks of foxes and goblins. You join the crowd, watching a troupe perform a no play about an ancient hero who defeats a demon. The movements are slow, deliberate, almost dreamlike, and you wonder how the villagers stay awake through it. But you admit there's a certain spell in the stillness, like being caught in someone else's dream. Quirky tidbit: some samurai were known to compose poetry about autumn moon viewing. Imagine hardened warriors, swords on their laps, earnestly debating which metaphor better captures the reflection of the moon on a still pond. You try it yourself, scribbling on a scrap of paper. Moonlight falls softly. Armor rusts, rice is counted. I need more sack. You're not winning any poetry contests, but hey, it's a start. Autumn also signals training intensifies. Cooler weather means fewer excuses. You spend mornings practicing with the bow arrows, thudding into straw targets, and afternoons sparring with fellow recruits. Your arms ache, your shins bruise, but each day you grow sharper. The veterans nod approvingly, though they still don't let you forget your rookie mistakes. One evening, after you nearly slip during sparring, an older samurai grins and says, "Good. Falling teaches you how to rise." You're not sure if it's wisdom or just an excuse for your clumsiness, but you take it to heart. Historians still argue whether autumn campaigns were as frequent as chronicles suggest. Some say lords preferred to fight once harvest was safely stored, ensuring the granaries were full and supply lines stable. Others claim such timing was idealized later in stories, making battles sound poetic, linked with red maple leaves falling like blood. Whatever the truth, you can't help but glance at the mountains already tipped with fiery foliage and wonder if war will come with the season's chill. Then, one evening, as you stand guard by the storehouse, you notice a fox darting across the courtyard, its fur lit orange by lantern glow. Villagers whisper that foxes are messengers of the gods, tricksters who can shapeshift into humans. You smirk, thinking if the fox really wanted mischief, it should try sneaking a rice sack past you. You're on full alert tonight. Still, a little shiver runs down your spine. Maybe you nod to it just in case. Days shorten, nights cool. You sit with comrades around a fire, eating roasted sweet potatoes, steam rising into the crisp air. Someone tells a story about a warrior who claimed to hear the voices of ancestors in the autumn wind. Someone else jokes that the voices were just indigestion. You laugh, your breath fogging in the night. Autumn becomes a season of sharpening, not just blades, but resolve. With the harvest secured, the festivals celebrated, and the training drilled into your bones, You feel more like a samurai than ever before. And as you watch the red leaves swirl in the courtyard, you know this season has given you something rare, the quiet strength to face whatever winter may bring. Winter comes without asking for permission. One day the mornings are brisk, the next, the frost bites at your toes even through straw sandals. You wake to find the water basin outside, frozen a thin sheet of ice reflecting the pale sky. Samurai armor feels even heavier now, not because of weight, but because of the cold seeping into every joint, stiffening leather straps, making steel almost cruel against your skin. Your duties don't stop. In fact, winter tests your endurance more than battle drills ever could. Patrols continue, and trudging through snow is no joke. The roads once buzzing with carts and travelers are quieter. Merchants hibernate until spring, and only the desperate or daring venture out. You're one of them. Your job? Guarding your lord's estate, ensuring firewood is stacked, rice is rationed, and villagers don't suffer too badly. Because if they starve, so do you. Mainstream historical fact: samurai castles were not the cozy stone keeps you might picture from Europe. Japanese castles were mostly wood, with open corridors and drafty walls that let the wind howl straight through. Winter living inside them was, let's be honest, miserable. Fires helped, but smoke stung your eyes and never reached every corner. You spend many nights wrapped in futons, teeth chattering, dreaming of hot miso soup. Quirky tidbit to keep warm. Some samurai tucked heated stones into cloth pouches and held them close to their bellies. Imagine warriors stoic as ever, sitting cross-legged, with what is essentially a medieval hot water bottle. You try it once. It works surprisingly well, though you nearly burn yourself the first time. Lesson learned: respect the rock. Still, winter isn't only hardship. It has its strange beauty. Snow drapes temples and rooftops like silk, turning the village into a hushed wonderland. Children laugh as they roll giant snowballs, inventing the very first snow samurai, complete with a stick for a katana. You chuckle, realizing even warriors of honor become playground legends when snow is involved. You also notice how silence changes everything. Nights are longer, filled with the crackle of fires, the crunch of snow under sandals, the distant barking of dogs. Without the cicadas of summer or the rustle of autumn harvests, you can hear your own thoughts more clearly. Sometimes a blessing, sometimes a curse. Around the hearth, fellow samurai tell ghost stories of icy spirits that lure travelers into the mountains. The most common, the Yuki Onna, the snow woman who appears in a white kimono and vanishes with the frost. Whether she's myth or warning to stay home during blizzards, you're not eager to find out. Historians still argue whether winter campaigns were common. Some say daimyo avoided them because supply lines froze, soldiers weakened, and horses faltered. Others insist winter raids happened precisely because enemies weren't expecting them. You meanwhile are hoping your lord prefers the let's wait until spring approach. Snow looks better in poems than on battlefields. Training continues indoors when possible. You sit in a cold hall, repeating kata, with wooden swords, breath puffing like smoke as you move. Sometimes teachers have you copy texts, instead of fighting discipline of the mind to match the body. Your fingers cramp holding a brush in the cold, and your characters look like they're shivering. Still, there's something oddly calming about ink on paper, as if writing tames the endless winter nights. Meals are humble, but warming hot stews, roasted chestnuts, endless bowls of rice with pickled vegetables. On rare lucky days, a pot of sake is shared, warming your throat as laughter ripples through the barracks. Someone strums a shamisen, singing a bawdy song that makes even the sternest veteran crack a smile. Humor, you realize, is the best insulation. But the cold isn't without danger. One night, a fire breaks out in a nearby hut, sparked by an overturned brazier. Flames roar faster than snow can smother them. You rush with others, forming a line, passing buckets of icy water, shouting until your throat burns. The hut is lost, but the villagers survive. Afterwards, everyone huddles closer to the fire, wary, sobered. Fire saves, but fire devours. And yet winter shapes you. Endurance grows, not from fighting glorious battles, but from facing the quiet, relentless test of survival. Each frostbitten patrol, each numb-fingered training session, each bowl of steaming rice feels like a small victory. You begin to think if you can withstand this, maybe the spring campaigns won't scare you so much. At night, lying beneath layers of futons, you stare at the rafters and listen to the wind whistle through the cracks. Somewhere outside, snow falls softly, erasing footprints, quieting the world. You smile faintly, thinking of the seasons you've endured. The wheel turns, and though the cold gnaws at your bones, you know spring will return. And with it, a new chapter in your samurai life. Spring finally arrives, not with fanfare, but with the quiet dripping of icicles melting from eaves and the first crocus poking through damp soil. You blink in the sunlight, surprised at how warm it feels after months of icy wind. Snow still lingers in the mountains, but in the valleys, cherry blossoms begin their brief and glorious reign. The whole world seems reborn, painted in shades of pink and white, delicate petals fluttering down like confetti over rooftops, pathways, even your armor. Your duties change almost immediately. Winter was about survival, but spring is about preparation. Rice fields need tending weapons, need maintenance, and your lord's retainers begin whispering of possible campaigns. Daimyo often chose spring to start wars. Roads thawed, rivers flowed again, and supplies moved more easily. You find yourself torn. Part of you wants the peace of tending fields and strolling beneath blossoms. But another part knows the samurai life rarely allows long stretches of tranquility. Mainstream historical fact, the cherry blossom or sakura, became deeply symbolic in Japanese culture precisely because of samurai. Its fleeting beauty mirrored their own code of life and death, glorious but short-lived. Watching the petals fall, you're reminded that your own existence is bound by similar fragility. It's a sobering thought wrapped in extraordinary beauty. Quirky tidbit, in some villages, people held blossom viewing parties, where they drank sake beneath the trees, a practice called hanami. You attend one with fellow warriors. At first, everyone sits stiff and formal, but after a few cups, stoicism melts into laughter. A veteran begins composing a terrible poem comparing his bald head to a cherry blossom petal, and someone snorts so hard, rice spills out their nose. Even you can't stop laughing, proving that warriors and poets share at least one weakness: alcohol under spring skies. Historians still argue whether hanami in the samurai era was truly about aesthetic appreciation, or just an excuse to drink outdoors. You lean toward the latter. After 3 cups of warm sake, nobody is pondering philosophy. They're just singing badly and hugging trees. But beneath the joy, spring carries tension. Scouts bring word of rival clans stirring. A neighbor has been fortifying his borders. Your lord holds meetings behind sliding doors that seem to last longer each day. Armor is inspected, spears, sharpened arrows, fletched anew. You polish your katana until it gleams, wondering when it will taste real battle again. Training ramps up as well. The ground, now free of snow, allows for more rigorous outdoor drills. You and others sprint across fields, practice cavalry maneuvers, and spar until sweat soaks your underclothes. One morning, a new recruit collapses mid-drill, exhausted. The instructor shakes his head and mutters, "A cherry blossom that falls too soon." It's equal parts poetic and brutal classic samurai humor. The village around you also hums with renewal. Farmers bend over paddies, planting rice shoots in straight lines, their reflections rippling in the water. Children chase each other through the streets, waving branches of petals like banners. Merchants return with goods that disappeared in winter: fresh fabrics, lacquerware, dried fish. The bustle of life returns, and so too does the tension of politics. Prosperity never goes unnoticed by rivals. One afternoon, you're assigned to escort your lord on a ceremonial outing. Beneath a canopy of blossoms, he offers prayers at a Shinto shrine, thanking the gods for surviving winter and asking for good harvests and safe campaigns. The priest waves sacred paper streamers, bells chime, and incense rises into the spring air. You stand guard, but your eyes wander upward, where petals swirl like snow, only softer, sweeter. Another evening, you find yourself sitting alone by a riverbank, petals floating in the current. You catch one in your palm, fragile and perfect, before the breeze whisks it away. The thought occurs, is this what Bushido really means? Not endless fighting, but knowing when to let go, when to yield, when to fall gracefully like a blossom. It's a rare moment of clarity, soon interrupted by a friend throwing a pebble into the river, splashing your sleeve. He grins. Stop brooding and drink. Spring also means festivals. Drums echo through the village, dancers whirl in masks, and food stalls sell skewered fish dumplings and roasted chestnuts. You wander through, savoring every bite. At one point, you watch a puppet play retelling the tale of a heroic samurai who sacrificed himself for honor. The children cheer, but you notice their parents exchange glances, pride mixed with worry. They know their own sons may live that story one day. Still, joy outweighs fear. You lie one evening beneath a cherry tree, looking up at the blossoms glowing pale in the moonlight. A soft breeze sends a flurry down over you, covering your hair and shoulders. You laugh quietly. It feels like nature itself is giving you a blessing. Or maybe a reminder. Life is fleeting, but beautiful all the same. The sakura season won't last long. Soon the petals will fall, the fields will grow green, and duty will once again weigh heavier than leisure. But for now, you breathe deeply, filling your lungs with the scent of blossoms and wood smoke, letting your heart rest in the fragile peace of spring. Summer presses down on you like a heavy cloak. The air hums with cicadas, rice fields shimmer in the sun, and your armor, when worn, feels like being sealed inside a small boiling oven. Sweat clings to your skin before you even lift a sword. Still, duty calls, and summer brings both prosperity and peril. By now, the rice paddies you watched being planted are growing tall, green, and alive with frogs. Farmers work from dawn to dusk, and samurai often help guard the harvest against bandits or rival clans. War doesn't pause for weather. In fact, some lords deliberately strike during the hottest months, hoping heat and disease will weaken their foes. You pray your daimyo isn't one of them. But the way preparations intensify, you sense a campaign is near. Mainstream historical fact samurai campaigns, often launched in summer, when roads were dry enough for supply wagons and horses to move quickly. Armies needed massive amounts of rice, so battles often coincided with harvest cycles. Control the rice, control the power. As you stand on a ridge overlooking swaying fields, you realize these plants are as valuable as swords. Quirky tidbit: in summer festivals, villagers sometimes floated paper lanterns down rivers to honor spirits. You join one of these ceremonies. Watching tiny flames drift across water at dusk, you and others can't help but compare them to lives bright, fragile, soon to vanish into the dark. Someone behind you mutters, "At least the lanterns don't have to polish armor." Everyone chuckles, breaking the solemnity. Historians still argue whether the samurai class truly helped in farming during off-campaign seasons, or if that was left entirely to peasants. You know firsthand, you've been knee-deep in mud helping replant a trampled paddy after stray cattle wrecked it. Your lord may not pick up a hoe, but lower-ranking samurai like you. Oh yes, you get dirty. Training continues in the sweltering heat. Sparring under the blazing sun feels more like punishment than preparation. Still, you push through lungs, burning hands, blistered. The instructor insists the discomfort steels you for war. You privately suspect it just makes everyone cranky. More than once, sword practice ends with someone accidentally swinging a little too hard, frustration spilling into bruises. When you're not training or patrolling summer evenings, offer small mercies. You sit with comrades by the river, letting your feet dangle in cool water. Fireflies glow around you, tiny sparks against the dark. The moment feels almost magical until mosquitoes arrive in swarms. Someone jokes that they're the true enemy of Japan, more dangerous than any rival clan. Judging by your itchy legs, you agree. War whispers grow louder. Messengers ride in and out of your lord's manor. Banners are inspected, supply lists lengthen. Horses are brushed daily, their tack polished until it gleams. You practice loading and unloading gear, preparing to march at a moment's notice. Every clang of a hammer on armor plates feels like a drumbeat of inevitability. Yet summer isn't only about dread. There are celebrations too. Bonodori dances, where villagers circle around a platform clapping and moving to drums. You join in awkward, at first your sword calluses not built for clapping in rhythm. But laughter soon overtakes self-consciousness, and you find yourself swept into the spinning crowd. For one night, sweat is from dancing, not training. Still, the season demands respect. Disease spreads easily and the heat boils dysentery fevers. A comrade falls ill 1 week, and you help tend him, fanning his face, bringing water. He recovers, but you can't shake the thought of how fragile even a warrior can be against unseen enemies. A sword cannot cut sickness. One afternoon, you're assigned to patrol a border village rumored to harbor spies. The air smells of pine resin and dust. As you question locals, you realize their fear isn't of spies, it's of hunger. Summer can be cruel, drying streams and wilting crops. You promise protection though. Deep down, you wonder if promises alone can shield anyone. And then finally the order comes. Prepare to march. The summer campaign begins. You line up with your unit armor, gleaming banners snapping in the hot wind. Your lord gives a speech about honor and destiny, his voice carrying over the assembled ranks. Sweat trickles down your back, but your grip on the spear tightens. The road stretches ahead, shimmering in the sun. Around you, comrades murmur prayers, adjust helmets, share nervous smiles. You inhale deeply, the scent of dust, sweat, and anticipation filling your lungs. The cicadas screech overhead, as if heralding your departure. As you take the first steps of the campaign march, you realize this is the rhythm of your life. Seasons of peace, seasons of war, each fleeting as blossoms, each heavy as steel. And with that, the story softens, eases, begins to fade. The march grows quieter in your mind, the cicada's song blending into a lull. The hot road cools, the weight of armor lightens, and you feel yourself drifting, as though the summer sun is not a burden, but a blanket pulling you into rest. The voices of comrades become gentle murmurs, then whispers, then nothing but a hum. Fireflies drift again in memory, their glow faint but comforting, guiding you towards sleep. You let go of the sword in your hand, let go of duty, let go of time itself. You become like the lanterns on the river, glowing softly, carried by currents floating toward peace. And just like that, you drift into dreams, safe, calm, and warm, beneath the endless summer sky.